Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Metro Board activities for October 24th, 2024. Thank you for joining us. Before we get started with today's business, I'd like to turn the floor over to Don Varley, Metro's Director of Safety and Analytics, for today's safety contact.
Thank you and good morning, members of the board. With the upcoming election and the end of daylight savings time, it's a good time to review tips for riding safely with Metro. As we adjust our clocks and check our smoke detectors, let's take a moment to ensure a safe journey. When using Metro Rail, walk carefully while in stations, using escalators, and boarding and alighting trains. The majority of customer safety events occur in stations on escalators or platforms, as people rush for trains or are distracted, resulting in slip, trips, or falls. Stand away from the platform edge until the train comes to a complete stop. Be mindful of the door chimes as doors open and close, and stand clear of the doors. While using Metrobus, never run after or alongside a moving bus. Only approach the bus at designated stops and when it has come to a complete stop. While on the bus, please hold on or sit properly in a seat, as motion can cause you to fall. Don't cross the street in front of the bus unless it has stopped at a traffic light. Use caution and look both ways while crossing the street. For additional information, see our rider guide at wamata.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Varley. Welcome to today's meeting of the Finance and Capital Committee. Since this is our first public meeting of the day, I'll ask Ms. Ellison, the Board Corporate Secretary, to call the roll.
Chair Letourneau.
Present.
Vice Chair Klein.
Present.
Director Santos.
Present.
Director McAndrew.
Here.
Director Smedberg.
Present.
Martin Proctor.
Good morning.
Director Hadenlow.
Here.
Director Drummer.
Present.
Mr. Chair, you have quorum.
Thank you. Our first order of business is to approve the agenda. I'd like to move approval of the agenda as presented. Are there any objections by members of the committee to the agenda? Seeing none, the agenda is approved as presented. Now to the approval of the minutes. We have the minutes of our October 10th meeting before us for approval. Are there any objections to the minutes as presented? Hearing none, we'll consider the minutes approved as presented. We have two updates on today's agenda. First is something that the board's been asking for and looking forward to, which is a discussion of our capital program and the processes in place to manage, develop, and execute projects. As Metro faces the prospect of limited capital funding in the coming years, our agency will need to update our strategy around capital program as it relates to the state of good repair, modernization, and expansion efforts. Next, we'll receive an update on the outlook for the FY26 and 27 operating budgets. As a reminder to everybody in the public, we've gone to a sort of a 2-year look at our budgeting process. Beginning with the current year's budget, staff's been developing detailed budget forecasts to provide greater predictability for funding partners and continuity for customers and regional planners. Today's discussion will help set the stage for the general manager's proposed 2026 budget presentation in the coming months. So to begin our discussion, I'll turn the floor over to Mr. Tom Webster, Metro's Chief Planning and Performance Officer, who's joined this morning by Mr. Andy Off, our Chief Infrastructure Officer, and Brian Dwyer, our Chief Operating Officer. Good morning, Tom.
Thank you, Chair Letourneau and members of the board. I'm pleased to be here this morning to provide an update on Metro's capital program, and I think this is likely the first of several discussions this fall and heading into our capital program cycle this year. Just briefly, our capital program and our strategic transformation plan are really deeply connected and linked. The strategic transformation plan provides guidance for planning and prioritization of our capital investments, and the capital program is really the roadmap and the investment plan to execute many of the things in the strategic transformation plan. So that link is quite strong. I'll start here with a little bit of a retrospective or history. The Metro, the region, with support from the federal government, made a very massive, substantial investment in the construction and the build out and the development of the Metro Rail, Metro Bus systems over the course of several decades. There was a fundamental mistake that the region and Metro and others made by not planning for the reinvestment in the physical assets, the systems, and the infrastructure on a routine life cycle basis. We really started to see the impacts of that mistake in the 2000 to 2010 time period, where that underinvestment led to lack of money for replacement and rehabilitation of the system's assets. Reliability and service started to suffer from that. There were disruptions, safety incidents, delays to service, and impacts for customers. That in part led to the region and the federal government coming together with the PREA funding that was authorized back in 2008 and started here at Metro in 2011. And that allowed for a ramp up in reinvestment in the system. Then that wasn't enough to keep up with all of the needs across the whole system. So in the 2010 to roughly 2017 timeframe, we had continued underinvestment in the system's assets, growing unmet needs, growing backlog of overdue work, and again, reliability and service issues, failures, delays, and other things. That ultimately led to the region coming together again to authorize and approve dedicated funding, $500 million from across the region for, again, reinvestment in the state of good repair of the Metro system. Those two things, PREA and dedicated funding, allowed us here at Metro to establish structured, formalized life cycle reinvestment programs, and meaning we had some predictability of that the funding would be there to establish these maintenance, rehabilitation, replacement programs. However, those funding sources were not indexed to inflation, so they've lost value over time. And recently, I think there's been broad recognition across our region and partners that that clearly is a problem as construction costs escalate and inflation grows. The funding source is staying at the same level, so $500 million for dedicated funding and $300 million for PREA can't keep up with all of those needs. So we are now facing a near-term and medium-term future here of lack of capacity to reinvest in the maintenance and rehabilitation of the Metro system. And this presentation today will cover what we expect will happen if that reinvestment is not advanced. And basically that's failing assets, reliability, and eventually safety concerns. So just briefly here, we have made substantial progress in reducing our state of good repair backlog. We estimated that at about $7 billion of overdue work several years ago. We've reduced that down to about $4 billion, again, thanks to that investment and the establishment of these programs. And to be clear here, the reduction in the backlog is a net number. So it's assets that were overdue for replacement have been addressed, and additional assets have been reinvested in to prevent them from going into this backlog of overdue work. We have seen very substantial performance improvements owing in large part to those reinvestments. So our customer satisfaction is at all-time highs. We are consistently seeing customer on-time performance on the rail system between 88 and 90%, and that's a fairly dramatic improvement from where we were not long ago. Ridership grew over 20% last fiscal year compared to the fiscal year before. We have a very high availability rate for both escalators and elevators as a result of, again, significant investment in replacement and rehabilitation of those assets. Railcar reliability, we've seen rapid improvements as our modern 7000 series cars have replaced legacy cars. And we've seen, again, because of reinvestment in the track and rail infrastructure, a substantial decrease in smoke and fire incidents, which of course are a safety concern and also have impacts to reliability and customer on-time performance. We need some help, John. Thank you. We have a process here to identify and forecast reinvestment needs in the static repair of the system. Current forecast for the 6-year period that starts next July, so FY26 through FY31, is that we have about 15 billion of assets that need reinvestment, rehabilitation, and replacement. We have funding for about 9 billion of those 15 billion of expenses. And then realistically, given the time horizon for the implementation of those projects, we expect we could execute about 11 billion of those 15 billion of needs during the 6-year period, as some of those projects have a longer planning and implementation horizon than this 6-year period. So again, this is a now issue as we are in the period of time when we should be planning to implement these projects and programs to reinvest in the system. A few things on the assumptions here. I mentioned the PREA and dedicated funding not being indexed to inflation. We estimate that in FY28, if our baseline capital funding were to increase by about 340 million, that would restore the purchasing power of both PREA and dedicated funding up to that time, so make up for the erosion due to inflation of those two funding sources. As of this fiscal year, we've issued about 3.6 billion, in bonds backed by dedicated funding. And we estimate that we're going to be exhausting that bonding capacity in about FY28 or FY29, using up essentially the remaining balance of dedicated funding to back those bonds. The capital program that the updated capital program that we'll present later this fall will assume the continuation of the existing regional commitments for dedicated funding and other capital contributions and continued capital funding from the federal government in both formula and PREA funding. Again, the 6-year period will be constrained by what we project will be available during the 6-year period, and that is less than we think we need to advance the program. This is a graphic illustration. This is familiar to the board. We've showed this a number of times, but the combination of that exhaustion of dedicated funding, debt capacity, and the use of capital funds for operating maintenance expenses, so the preventive maintenance transfer, are accelerating the funding deficits that we face in the capital program. Again, another summary here of these issues. Importantly, I'll point out that red line on the graph. This is our projected or our actual and projected backlog of overdue work, given our assumed projected funding without additional investment. With additional investment, we would expect that red line to level off and even go down as we are able to address needs before they come due. We have a fairly mature capital program development process here at Metro that we've been working on for about the past decade. That includes a 1-year capital budget that's an expenditure-based forecast of investment for the upcoming year, a 6-year capital improvement program that's constrained by projected available funding, and then a long-range capital plan that is essentially financially unconstrained, that factors in all of the things that the team has identified for reinvestment in the system and modernization opportunities. So we go through a life cycle planning and programming process each year, but importantly, that process is updating what is essentially a rolling 6-year capital program and a rolling multi-year forecast for capital. In terms of prioritization, we have a federally compliant process for identifying and prioritizing capital stated good repair needs. So again, that's the reinvestment, rehabilitation, and replacement activities here at Metro. That process, of course, has matured over the years and is subject to review, oversight, and audit of a number of entities, including our federal partners at FTA, GAO, our independent OIG here at Metro, and a number of our jurisdictional partners. That is an input into our planning and prioritization process for our existing capital program, which again is largely about reinvestment, rehabilitation, and replacement, in part because the funding for our capital program is designed to do that. We've had some discussions in the DMV Moves context and elsewhere about process for regional prioritization of modernization and expansion investments. So there are many opportunities here for modernization and expansion of the region's transit system. A number of them are listed here on this slide. But again, our team acknowledges that there are various projects and a large inventory of over 100 billion of project concepts and ideas across our region, and that our region really needs a focused planning and prioritization effort to ensure that value comes from those potential investments. So with this constrained environment, it becomes that much more important to ensure we are focused on delivering the capital program as efficiently as possible. So our team, Andy in particular, but really across the board, has been working to identify capital program cost savings to preserve resources for future state of good repair investments. So far, we've identified about 175 million of capital program administrative savings. So these are reductions in consulting costs, reductions in support costs for programs without impacting the outcomes or the delivery of the scope of the project. So that's over about a 7-year period, but a very substantial reduction that preserves resources for the future. We're also working through a really wide and complex net of requirements, standards, and practices, and trying our best to reduce customization and the things that have been applied here over the years that lead to increased costs and delivery of projects. So far, we've identified about 100 million through reviewing projects and standards and requirements, and again, reduced that from programs and reinvested that in future state of good repair activities. So a couple of examples, bus shelters that we've talked about a few times, our drainage pumping stations project review is resulting in a project cost reduction of about $5 million. And then a careful look through our digital modernization program, which is really critical here at Metro to ensure there isn't redundancy and we're sharing services as much as possible. So back again to that history, we are in a period now where we have a largely proactive capital program where we are addressing needs before they become an issue. That has not been the case here at Metro before the last few years. We were in a primarily reactive mode, so things would break and we go out and try to fix them or correct the issue. With a lack of funding to reinvest in the program, we are preparing for a shift back to that reactive program. So an activity like escalator replacement, we've had for I think a little over a decade now, a structured program to go in and replace escalators. Sometime during this 6-year period, we will lack the funding to have that proactive replacement program. And Andy's team will be shifting to a much more reactive, hey, something's not working here, we're going to go out and fix it, rather than proactively replacing escalators when they come due. Again, some examples here of different types of assets and what happens if we don't take action. And we've been there before, so these are images of our system versus what happens if we are able to proactively reinvest in the system. Our capital program proposal this fall and winter will largely continue projects, programs, and investments that are already underway, and essentially following through on the multi-year commitments that we've made through those projects. Again, we have a one-year capital budget, but it is made up of largely projects that extend over multiple years. So this list of projects and programs for 26 to 31 is very similar to the list of projects and programs from FY25 and FY25 to FY 2030. There are a number of projects here that are in execution already, and then some that are in planning and development. So today we're going to talk a little bit about two major project areas, zero emission bus and our fleet of the future 8,000 series rail cars. There are additional project updates in the appendix here, and of course, as I mentioned, there'll be further discussions, but we wanted to bring some focus to these two as they're large and significant components of the capital program in our future here at Metro. So zero emission bus, just as a reminder, the board adopted updated goals for reaching a fully zero emission bus fleet back in 2023. That's to be fully zero emission bus fleet by 2042 and only make zero emission bus purchases by 2027. The team has completed our zero emission bus transition plan, essentially the plan to get there by 2027 and 2042. And we have several projects underway at Northern Bladensburg and Cinderbed to electrify those garages, as well as we've acquired some electric buses and have a bus procurement underway to acquire more. However, we face some pretty significant challenges here beyond those projects that are funded and those initial electric buses that are included in our capital program. We don't have the funding to advance this program beyond our current 6-year program. So about 25% of the conversion is funded. We're also facing a situation where the market can't support the needs that we have. So there's limited manufacturing capacity. Essentially, there's only one Buy America compliant domestic manufacturer who can deliver the buses that we need for the electrification conversion. We're working with partners, the federal government, industry partners, to try to address some of these challenges. And one of the key things here is standardization of buses and bus fleet and the equipment, so that all agencies aren't trying to buy a different product, and simplify things for the manufacturing community. But we definitely face some challenges here, both from a delivery and a financial capacity standpoint. Really want to emphasize here providing frequent, reliable service and driving ridership is clearly the most important thing for both Metro and for our region from an environmental standpoint. So if we're forced to choose here between providing safe and reliable bus service and frequent service and driving ridership and some of these trade-offs on the type of buses that we acquire, we want to lean heavily into continuing to provide safe, frequent, and reliable service. A quick update on our 8,000 series rail cars. So we have ordered and design is underway for 256 8,000 series legacy or rail cars to replace legacy rail cars. We expect those to arrive in 2028. There's an option for a second increment of 104 vehicles and then some options beyond that. That first option is funded in our existing capital program, which will allow for again, improved rail service to support growing ridership. We would need additional operating resources to be able to operate those rail cars above and beyond our current operating budget. But again, those additional rail cars beyond the base in this first option would allow us to support the region's growth and potential future service improvements and capacity improvements. And I think that concludes the presentation. We have just a quick schedule here. As I mentioned, there'll be future updates with a proposed budget and an update on our long-range capital plan later this fall. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Tom, for that somewhat demoralizing presentation. But I know that the team is working very hard to maximize the dollars. A little bit for questions in a minute, but maybe just kind of one top-level framing question, because as I'm looking at this and I'm thinking about the implications of not being able to get to 100% of state of good repair, which obviously will have some implications, especially down the road, balancing against, I don't necessarily want customers to think that the system's not safe. So can you talk, any of you talk a little bit about the balancing act and how we prioritize what gets funded, and whether if we have a significant issue that arises, our ability to address that within the capital budget?
Yes, sir. Good morning, Chair Letourneau and board members. So I think an example may be Tom shared our drainage pumping station efficiencies, where we're squeezing about $5 million out of that program. And the way we're doing that, as opposed to buying a new car, we are changing the left tire, the windshield, and the transmission, right? So we're taking a much more surgical approach to how we do those things. So over many years, it's perhaps not as cost effective to do it that way. But in an overly constrained environment, those are things we need to do, because that $5 million we squeeze out of that drainage pumping station program allows us to add $5 million to replace a few bad breakers and a traction power substation. So those are the trade-offs that become, it takes more time and more effort, but are important to get just at your point, which is ensuring we're doing what makes the system safe. And where we're going to lose is perhaps on reliability, but certainly not on, from a safety perspective.
Chair Letourneau, board members, good morning. I'd just add to what Mr. Off said, that obviously our procedures won't change with regards to added failures. And as Tom alluded to, the smoke and fire incidents in the system have been reduced. We're really focused on that through track work, power work, et cetera. But I do think as an agency, we handle those incidents better than we used to. And all of the work we've done with our transportation staff, with our safety staff and the mixed staff, the maintenance staff, none of that will change. If we have to react to things more often, that's never a good thing, but we'll do what we need to do.
This is going to cost us more money in the long run, ultimately, right? Because if we're not getting ahead of maintenance, eventually it's a problem, yes. Then you have to deal with it, and it ends up probably being more expensive.
Correct, and I would not expect, if we didn't make those investments, for the customer satisfaction numbers to stay as they are, or ridership to stay as high as they are. I think we can look around the country at other peer agencies who unfortunately have had some funding problems, and they're experiencing that.
Your accent brings one to mind, right? Okay. Clark,
Chair Letourneau, maybe I just add a comment to that, because I think I want to make sure we're all talking about the same duration of time on that comment, right? So in the immediate term, you are correct. The system, listen, I use the system just like I think everyone took the system here today. The system is very safe, right? Doesn't mean we'll never have a perfect day, but the system is very safe. And we're meeting or beating all of our safety metrics, and quite frankly, leading the NTD on safety metrics around the country. What we're trying to highlight here is we will always prioritize things that are safety related, but there will be a time that the system becomes less reliable, and that reliability could lead to safety issues. And that's what happened in the teens here. So it wasn't that the system was totally unsafe, but it got to a point where that reliability then can lead to acute safety issues, right? So arcing insulators, water in tunnels, crumbling platforms, bus maintenance, all of that kind of thing. So what we're really trying to sound the alarm on is in the immediacy, next few years, we don't see the infrastructure just, going off the cliff, if you will. But because of our planning, if we don't have this resolved in the near future, we are going to then start having major impacts on our planning to execute, which means the board of 2030 and the staff of 2030 will be starting to deal with the problems of the board and the staff of 2018. And there's no way getting out of that. So that's why we really want to highlight. So it's not an immediacy of threat to people's kind of customer satisfaction or the system reliability, but it is an immediacy of the funding to prevent that from happening, because we can't put the genie back in the bottle. So we've talked about this a lot, but I appreciate the framing of your question.
Questions from committee members first? Ms. Klein?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Two kind of more detailed questions and one broader one. Can you say a little bit more about the timing of the later options on the 8K series? It looks like the initial delivery and then the first option is funded, but there's more options in the contract, right? So that's how soon would we have to make decisions about those?
It's contractually set up that 70 months after the execution of the contract, so I believe it's September of 2027, we'll have to make or 2026, we'll have to make a decision about the first option, and then they flow from there, Director. So it's all based on, Tom had mentioned the fact that option 1 is funded, the rest of them are not, but it's contractually based when we have to
Is
execute.
it like a year later or something? Like, we're talking pretty quick here?
If I read through my notes, I could probably give them to you. They're on, I think, year cadences, basically about when we'd have to make the decision.
I think that sounds right. So that's pretty quick in the scheme of things, for when we're going to have to make those decisions, and not exercising an option when we have that possibility is a very kind of costly in the long run thing to do. Thank you for that. On the, let me see, what did I write here? Sorry. Yeah, just on the zero emission buses, if we did have the funding to procure additional buses, does the market today, would we be able to actually do that? Or is there a big backlog?
There is a very significant backlog. We have in our existing capital program the funding to support the near term, but if nothing changes, the likelihood of being able to acquire 100+ electric buses a year indefinitely it's not looking great.
Right, and that's not just because of our funding, it's a market-wide issue. Right. Okay.
And it's not just us, Director. Again, that's something that our peers are suffering with as well.
Yeah, which is a challenge for the industry, right? Because the buses that are purchased today are going to be on the road for 10, 12, 10, 15 or more years. So, these are important decisions with long-term consequences. And it's unfortunate that we don't have the infrastructure in place nationally to deliver on these goals. And then my broader question is, so I think one of the things that I've been struggling with a little bit is the how the decisions are made for programming things that are not core state of good repair. When we have the state, I understand how the state of good repair works. You look at what the asset's expected life is, its condition, et cetera, its use, and there's tools to prioritize those. But for something that is not a state of good repair need exactly, how do we go about deciding which of those I guess what we've been calling modernization, how do we go about deciding which of those should be funded?
So thank you for the question. I'll say a few things about this. First, as I mentioned earlier, the nature of Metro's funding today, federal and jurisdictional funding, come with a variety of overlapping and sometimes conflicting requirements. Many times, though, or in most cases, though, the funding is restricted to stated grid repair activities, rehabilitation and replacement activities. So that is a major constraining factor on doing things that are outside of those needs. I think most of our modernization activities are essentially ancillary or a component of a rehabilitation or replacement activity. So I've used this example a number of times, but we're not going to replace a bus garage in kind with the same style bus garage that was built in the 1920s. So when that is built, there are modernization components of that larger state of good repair project. And essentially the way we make the decisions on how to do that, when they're a larger scale, we do alternatives analyses, cost benefit analyses, or business cases on is this investment worth making as we're making the larger state of good repair replacement activity. There are other things like replacing static signage with digital screens that may appear to be an expansion or an enhancement, but in fact, many of those are replacing something that is actually quite expensive, because every time something on that sign changes, our team has to go out and sometimes impact service and replace porcelain signage with updated information. So there are some surface-looking modernization activities that actually are state of good repair and a wiser long-term investment, and that's what some of our business case activity helps us to sort through.
The only other thing I think I'd add, Director, is at a more micro level, we have a 7:30 meeting every morning with the operating and maintenance staff to kind of, I used this term last week, but it's basically defending your life. So if we had a track issue, if we had a signal issue, if we had a vehicle failure, there's people on from all of those teams talking about why that happened and what we're going to do about it. To Tom's point, I think we are very good. State of good repair is a large kind of paradigm, really getting into the details. The meeting's run by a person who's in charge of reliability engineering, and it's really digging into, with the funding we have, whether operating or capital, what can we do better to have less failures? Because that's not only better service, obviously we run into safety engendered issues when we have problems with the service.
Yeah, and let me say, actually, as demoralizing as the presentation may have been, the bright light really is what's been done to address the state of good repair backlog. I mean, the conversation about that now is so much different than it was 10 years ago or whatnot. Bringing that backlog down is a really phenomenal
It's impactful.
accomplishment. So let's focus a little bit on the positive accomplishments there too.
That and the $275 million in savings, which is pretty darn impressive too. Other comments, questions from members of the committee first? Mr. McAndrew, then we'll go to everybody else.
I'm going to echo what Sarah said, and it's tough to sit here today with a presentation such as this and say, we need to build a program for how we assess, prioritize, and value those scarce finite dollars for growth, whether it be growth or enhancements. But there's, the reality in transportation and infrastructure is that there's never enough money to do everything that everybody wants to do. And so you actually do have to prioritize. And then the question becomes, how do you prioritize? I think that this team has done a very good job of prioritizing over since 2018 to build the system, as Sarah said, that folks are relying on today, that folks are happy with today. And it's showing in terms of ridership. But I don't want to lose sight of the need to be thinking about the future, right? And so I do think that this is worth spending some time. Virginia has had for a number of years their smart scale model, very transparent and accountable. Maryland, under Governor Moore's leadership, has been looking at, the data-led, heart-strong initiatives and what we can do to prioritize as well, and learning from Virginia. So I just think, it's an opportunity for us to think similarly here. Our capital program is big, and there are opportunities within to, open and articulate what it is that we're investing in and why, both for our own benefit here, but also for the funders and the general public as well. So I think any and all opportunities in that space is worth the time.
Just briefly here, this is a summary of that, the comments you're making just now. I think our team has done a lot to both develop and build and articulate the methodology that we follow for the state of good repair need prioritization, and there's a large variety of reports and publications on that. What our region has not done particularly well is articulate a coordinated prioritization process for modernization and expansion and extension investments. It's pretty fragmented, and so that's an area of focus certainly for our team, and again in that DMV moves in other contexts.
Okay, Dr. Lowe, finally your turn.
I mean, no, I really enjoyed listening to everyone else's questions because these answers have already given me so much to think about. Like, I'm going to be walking around the rest of the day just like whispering porcelain signage to myself and like looking for it. Like I'm going to fall asleep tonight being like, porcelain, there's porcelain signage somewhere. And I just want to apologize to everyone for earlier. Having heard about this 7:30 daily meeting, I will never complain about the board meeting starting at 8:30 ever again, and I take back everything that I said, and I'm sorry. Okay. You guys are wrong to think that this presentation is depressing. First, Tom, you're a really measured person, but there was something a little different about this presentation. There was like a little more oomph in your voice. I feel that you have a passion for capital planning, and I love that. It's like I'm learning more because of the energy that was infused here. So I love that. I think that we should talk a little bit more about how value engineering the capital plan has been super high yield. Like 275 million is just a really incredible number of digits, right? And that is great work. It's awesome, and it speaks to a whole new level of maturity within the entire capital planning process and team within the organization that is basically unprecedented for Metro, but is where we need to be, and is just, it's so smart and sophisticated. So, you know, I view that as heartening, and it makes me happy. I do have a question about kind of like exactly how the team thinks through this stuff, though, because while the example of like just getting like essentially the same bus shelter for half the money, it's like no brainer, duh. I understand that example. Sometimes spending more money saves money. Like, I'm thinking back to when we went to visit the Red Line Tunnel project, and we were talking about like that cool way that Metro's like figured out how to like water reinforce the Red Line, like by like applying like a lining to the outside. And, you know, the staff were telling me that like they've never seen the tunnel as dry as it is now in the places where that has been done, though obviously it's very expensive to do. I think about how much of the sort of wear and tear and like ultimate capital need we were seeing in the tunnel that is, I don't think I really understood how much of it is related to water because of how far underground our system is. Although I'm sure there's water above ground too. I don't think I had fully understood that before that trip. And so like, you can start to imagine like, oh, if I spend a lot of money on waterproofing, actually I will save money later because water won't be messing up all this stuff that runs on electricity. So like, how do we think through a trade-off like that is really like a time or capital flow trade-off versus some capital expenditures are like electric buses are more expensive than diesel buses, but there is an operational savings because electric buses you don't have to buy gas for them or diesel. So like, you know, like a normal person can understand that, right? Like they're thinking about the same thing if they're gonna like if they're gonna like spend more upfront to like get a Tesla, they're thinking like, I will also save money later. So like, how do we think through trade-offs between the capital program and the operating program as we go through this value engineering process? Can you talk a little bit more about those two questions?
Yeah, thank you for the comments and that question. I think importantly here, a lot of these issues are in the details of each need of each project, and what we've done here is really tried to empower the teams connected to both the operations, the maintenance, the sustainment of the activity, and the project teams, the project managers, to consider these things. Okay, so we're going out. We have to touch this asset for one reason or another. Are there opportunities to do other things, and then share that back with the group? Are there cost efficiencies to doing multiple things at once? Are there long-term operating cost savings as part of that reinvestment in this system? So really, it's a philosophy and a culture sort of thing, rather than a top-down enforcement of those of a methodology or something like that. But I think what we're facing here is because we've had predictable resources, we've been able to mature that process and empower people. As we are more and more constrained, we only have the money to do the first thing, and then or what's absolutely essential. A lot of the cost in going out and doing the work is going out and doing the process of getting to it. So there's tremendous efficiency in doing multiple things at the same time over the long term. So we lose some of that with less resource. But again, the philosophy and the methodology here is really make sure we're looking at things holistically and empowering people to bring ideas forward, and then considering those trade-offs within the details of a specific asset need or project.
I think I just got a little part on that, and this slide's perfect for it. So our state of repair, I think Tom answered that well. Where, and this folds into Board Member McAndrew's question because there's a synergy between the two. We have projects we would like to do that you could call modernization. I don't call them expansion, but certainly I would call them optimization or enhancement. And a good example would be regional bus priority. We need to spend more capital dollars as a region doing bus priority, and we will get operating savings because of that.
Yeah.
Because our buses don't move. And so a bus moving at 4 miles an hour versus a bus moving at 10 mile an hour average means probably 1 or 2 less buses on the same route for the same frequency, as an example, right? So that's good use of capital dollars. When you were all out in the Red Line Tunnel, I think you went into a train control room. Our train control system is aging, and at some point will not be supported. And it is the thing that runs the entire railroad. Signals are the thing that runs the railroad. And we need to get to an advanced signaling system. A good example of advanced signal system, so a lot of people talk about communications-based train control, right? So CBTC. We could go from, Andy, what do we have on the Red Line? 28 train control rooms, something like that, give or take? 32, okay. There you go. So we have 32 train control rooms. Depending on how the design works out, we might end up with 1 or 2. So we go from that type of infrastructure that has to be maintained every day with managing water, managing air conditioning, managing all this old equipment, to 1 or 2, which is more or less like a mini data center that runs the entire railroad.
Okay.
That's the strategic investments we need to make. We need to spend billions to do the upgrades. We're going to have to do it one way or the other because otherwise we won't be able to run trains at some point. But if we can start actually having predictability around those sources, we could do it in a way that leads to a better ROI over the long term. So it doesn't just replace, we get long-term ROI as well. And our team would love to do more of that. And that's really what DMV Moves is trying to expose, which is if we don't have any local match, we can't even go after the federal programs to do something like a core capacity grant to think through that upgrade.
Okay, so I think that like either as part of DMV Moves or like starting here at the board and then maybe expanding the conversation, we should have some more intensive work sessions where we focus on some of these specific, more like spend way more money now to save way more money later kind of capital things. Like the things that immediately are coming to my mind are obviously not the first time that someone's raised signals. The platform screen door idea, the tunnel lining topic, and bus prioritization. Those are kind of the four that like immediately come to mind to me that like, I can't go like over to the Wilson building right now and say like, well, I want to talk about like this capital investment idea because like, I don't like what dollar amount would I even like, I can't just go over there and just be like, give me hojillions, you know, so that we can do stuff. Like, I need to like wrap my head around.
Not what a hojillion is,
Yeah.
but it sounds good though.
Joe,
Yeah.
there's numbers you've never heard.
We understand.
Like
So,
we should have like a series of more focused sessions where we dive a little deeper on these topics and get like the expertise and the like what's so impressive about where the capital planning team is now is like how fully they have their heads wrapped around the big picture and how all these different parts fit together. But we need to get some of that knowledge out to a wider group of people.
sure, a great comment, something we're working on. I think in the last deck of the DMV Move stuff that obviously on the board saw it's this pyramid, and it was part of the last board package as well. So again, it's figuring out our baseline, which is we got to get $340 million to reinstall our baseline and ideally index, so we have a state of good repair program that works for us long term, so which is 99% of the conversation we're having. Then it's that next level, which is more or less the right-hand box here at the bottom. Then the box above that is expansion, which quite frankly, we have no chance of expanding until we solve kind of the right-hand box. So things we're really focused on, quite frankly, the advanced signaling and platform screen doors go kind of hand in hand.
Yeah, I want to learn more.
That. So that's one element. Regional bus is another part. And probably a big thing we're thinking through is modernization of our entire supply chain and how we do our warehousing, parts management, all of that stuff. So those are probably three obvious things that we know we need capital money to drive down cost at the same time. But we need to also maximize our infrastructure. So, you know, when we talk about hours of service, we need to run more trains at some point to certain places, right? So we got to get some buy-in in this region that we're gonna solve for, you know, we're still taking from our capital program to fill our operating budget.
True, yeah.
So until we solve our underlying issue, quite frankly, we want to do these things and it's great to talk about them and we do a lot of analysis, but it's at a certain point, it's a waste of time if we can't solve not taking capital money to fill the operating budget again, year after year. Because it's a dream versus reality. And that's what the real hope is here as we get more exposure to understand that we need to think long-term as an organization and region.
Thanks, Randy.
Okay, Ms. Santos.
Thank you. And I will be quick because I see we're running a little bit behind. So a few comments and then some questions. Firstly, just wanted to underscore, I really like the framing of shifting from reactive to proactive, or from, I think of it as shifting from firefighting crisis to planning and being able to think about quality and, as the general manager just said, return on investment moving forward. I think that's really important. And I want to commend staff leadership because I think this is a combination of financial commitment by our various jurisdictional partners and at the same time as well the attention and obsession of leadership and management in this period. So again, just to acknowledge that. I mean, half joking with the general manager about a couple of items I just want to highlight. I know the answer, but I just want to hear you all articulate this. So one of the things that for me was a little bit surprising to learn as part of our struggles with the budget is the cost of certain items and the cost of those items are beyond the control of Metro, so it's not Metro's fault. For example, as Director Klein was just pointing out, the buses, the electrified buses that we don't have access to, or we cannot purchase or receive the buses that had been envisioned years ago. Could you just explain a little bit about what is the approximate cost per bus? Because I was a little surprised to learn that, given my personal experiences globally, and I know how much it costs elsewhere and how that lends into the timing and availability of that. And go ahead, sorry.
I'll jump in on that one, Chair. So Tom highlighted, we're actually doing a lot of work in the industry. I'm actually on this White House APTA coordination panel, the FTA, and we all put together. So one is to try to reduce customization. Part of it is how we procure buses in industry so the suppliers could actually, and the manufacturers could have line of sight on payment. There was a big issue around the industry on that. Take all that away, it costs too much to buy a bus in America, and there's no getting around that. So, we could spend upwards of $1.5 million on a bus. That same bus, I was talking to the head of Transport for London a few weeks ago, probably realistically maybe 500,000 to 600,000. When I was in Madrid talking to their leadership, they might even buy that less than what London would do. Now, there might be some nuance on that, obviously. Maybe the apple is not the exact same apple. We just don't have enough manufacturing supply in this country. And again, not to get political, but we have very detailed Buy America clauses that the rest of the world doesn't have. We have DBE requirements that the rest of the world doesn't have. So not to suggest all those policy goals are not good or bad, but the requirements. There's a lot of additional cost to buy something in America that in France, Germany, Brazil, you could probably buy a brand new bus for $250,000, $300,000 that we would buy for $1 million. Maybe ours are a little bit better, maybe, but even if it was a little bit better, you could buy 3 of them. So at some point, we can't build rail projects in this country anymore. We've created this machine where it takes 5 years to get through like a NEPA process. We have to figure out how to buy and transact and transit cheaper to deliver the service the whole country needs. So I'm glad you pointed out. I wish there was something that Metro we could do. It's frustrating all around.
Thank you, General Manager. The reason I mention it again is I think we agree with the public goods, and I don't think it's a commentary about the policies themselves, but I also invite us as board members to consider what are the things that our jurisdictional partners can do, limited though they maybe not specific to bus, but other ways that we can assist with speeding up the process for collaborating together, whether it's around decisions for joint development projects, permitting, other regulatory things. I just want to flag that because I think that there are certain things that are outside of Metro's control, and yet Metro understandably is held responsible for the costs and the timing. So there's that. The other thing I just also wanted to highlight, one of the slides mentioned the cost of delivering bus shelters is getting cut in half. And again, could you just articulate what is the cost per shelter after your your improvements and how you were able to do that? And I have one last thing after that.
Yes, ma'am. I can take a swing at that. So our original or the existing bus shelter standard, a few years ago was developed kind of during the beginning of the platform improvement program, where the intent was to replicate to best possible some of the stuff we were doing, up to make it look more like things on the rail side, like the windscreens and the, aluminum and stuff. So what that necessitated was developing a non-commercially available off-the-shelf product. Obviously not cost effective nor necessarily warranted at the time. So nonetheless, that's what we were moving with. So when the general manager arrived and we began to talk through delivery of that program, at scale, obviously we took a hard look at what the standard was and is that necessary? The answer was no. So we cut back, not cut back, but I mean, we changed some, our approach to some things. We're able to identify a current commercially available product that, has the same design life, lighting, seating amenities, wind and rain shelter. And we're able to ultimately deliver that. I believe at the end, it was about just over $100,000, a shelter as compared to, we were hovering, just around 400. So, significant savings.
Thank you very much. And again, to commend the team for taking a hard look, because these are the sorts of decisions about standards that are appropriate and balancing between economic considerations and other goods. And then last comment is I agree with Director Lowe and Director McAndrew about the relevance and importance of the board being more engaged on the criteria that we apply for the capital budget. And it's obviously iterative depending on resources, availability, and whatnot. And just generally, one of the challenges and observation is that we are balancing between the direct impact to Metro and then the indirect impacts in terms of greater public goods that we as an institution don't benefit from, but they're good for the region, right? So what I mean by that is an indirect good is, for example, Buy America, right? So there's, again, a positive thing, or balancing jobs for the region, or again, environmental benefits. And I think some of this has been implicit, and I think I agree with my colleagues over here that for us, I think it's would behoove us to be more proactive in thinking about and attempting to quantify some of those benefits, because I know it is appropriate for us to be thinking of return on investment, not just in terms of direct financial impact, but in terms of those other broader impacts as well. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks. All right, Mr. Drummer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This dialogue has been very helpful. This presentation has been very helpful. And I'd like to just take a segue or make a segue and make some macro comments, if I could. The first, can you go to slide number 5, if you would? Yes, invaluable. And I want to say that I'll help make the transition from demoralizing to prudent and refreshing transparency. I think it's very necessary, very important. Decisions made 15 years ago were ideal 15 years ago. And we're in the best position now to make decisions that will have an impact 20 years from now. And now is the time to do it. And wow, do we have the right team in place to make decisions that will have an impact 15 years from now. So thank you for the work you're doing. We know it's hard. Most of us don't do this every day when you're talking about capital programs, but you all have done a great job of tying capital programs to sustainment and improving the system, to growing ridership and regional transit needs. We don't normally tie capital programs to that, but you all are doing that. And the general manager always focuses on that. So thank you for making that happen. Just like DMV moves, we're looking at 2039, 2040. And I'm hoping that you all keep that focus and stay on top of it, regardless of where we are with the resourcing. And it's going to pay huge dividends in the long run. So thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, I appreciate the good discussion from everybody. As indicated, we are quite a bit behind schedule, so we need to jump to our FY 26 and 27 operating outlook.
Thank you.
All right. Good morning, Bob. Yeah, it's just the whole capital budget and the operating. That's all. 5.
It's okay.
You're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name's Robert Tasillo. I'm Senior Vice President for Management and Budget, and I have the great opportunity here this morning to give you a really brief overview of our 2026 operating budget outlook and some improvements we're making to the budget process. Sorry, Tom, I got to do this. Okay, thanks. So this is the strategic transformation plan. I think everyone knows about it. It's our North Star. It's used to guide our Metro decision-making process based on 4 strategic goals. In 26 and 27, our operating budget outlook aligns with the commitment in the plan to good financial stewardship, which supports all 4 goals. And this is consistent with our commitment to financial stability, which is one of the key objectives under the sustainability goal. Next slide, thanks. Recent accomplishments, I know you are aware of all of these. It's worth saying them at least one more time, at least briefly, on ridership, customer satisfaction, crime abatement, and fare evasion. On ridership, from 2023 to 2024, ridership grew 21%. This trend is continuing in the first quarter of fiscal year 2025, and next month you'll get an update on Q1 financials. Customer satisfaction across all modes exceeded all of its targets, hitting record highs. Serious crime across the system during 2024 is down 14% compared to 2023, and fare evasion is down 82% on Metro Rail following the installation of the taller and stronger fare gates at all 98 stations. Next slide. So some actions that we've taken to reduce expenses and to grow revenue. The board is familiar with all of these. The bus and rail fare increases in 2025 of 12.5% on weekdays and up to 25% on weekends. Targeted service reductions in 2025 based on travel patterns. The new stronger and taller fare gates. And then the salary and wage freeze that was applied for both Local 689 and the agreement that was reached in August, as well as for non-represented employees in 2025. Next slide, Tom. So this is the budget process, and the donut or wheel in the center is sort of displays the way the process works, starting in August at the very top, when we sort of begin the process, and then moving clockwise. We're in the October-November phase now, which we still continue to work on the budget. But again, in December, we will submit the GM's proposed budget. I think it's December 12th. Late January, we'll have public hearings on the proposed budget, and then in late March, the GM's budget will be submitted to the board for review and approval. The outside of the donut or wheel shows the improvements that we're making. The chairman referred to the second year forecast using multi-year economic assumptions, showing fare and service impact projections, and also showing a high-level subsidy outlook for the second year, which I think offers valuable insight into potential funding requirements and some challenges. Next slide. Next time. So these are high-level budget drivers. Again, the focus is ridership, inflation, the loss of federal relief. All the federal relief funding that we've received will be used up during 2025. And then also the over-reliance on using capital funding to cover operating preventive maintenance expenses creates a challenging financial environment. And then the new collective bargaining agreement for Local 689 offers some financial stability by minimizing the impact of future inflationary spikes. Next slide. So this is a ridership graph. Ridership is on the bottom line, revenues on the top line, going back to 2019. Obviously, the big dip in 2021, and then the positive trend coming out of 2021, both on ridership and on the revenue side. And we'll be providing you with more updates on that next month. Next slide quickly is budget driver. So on the revenue side, we have passenger and non-passenger revenue. On the passenger side, it's primarily ridership growth, though fare evasion, service, and average fares also also come into play. On the non-passenger side, the focus is on parking, real estate development, and advertising. And again, real estate development, we primarily focus on joint development projects, of which we expect that they will generate $16 to $19 million in revenue during 26 and 27. Next one. Budget drivers on the personnel cost side, we focused on the collective bargaining agreement here. On the non-personnel expenses, again, it's inflation. And again, we use the CPI to measure that. Energy costs, we are sort of projecting to increase. And paratransit, which is now we have a blend of traditional and lower cost alternative providers, which helps to reduce expenses. This is a slide of some 5 focus areas, or I call them buckets, that we are focusing on. Leveraging technology advancements, optimizing space, enhancing bus and rail efficiency, improving internal processes, and consolidating procurements. We'll give you an update next month on those. Slide 11 is a snapshot of what we think the shortfall is in 2026. And again, it's a snapshot. So, and again, it's $217 million. And then ways to address that on the right is $95 million in additional subsidy, which was included in the February 2024 two-year budget plan, additional one-time savings, and then an additional $94 million in PM to bring the total up to 154, and we will provide an update to that slide as well. I think you take over. Yep.
All right. Thank you, Bob.
Yep.
So the budget process and the annual cycle here also gives us an opportunity to look at bus and rail service plans for the upcoming year. And again, today we'll focus primarily on some of the things the team is considering with respect to rail service for the coming year. Again, focused on our service optimization goals. So providing good, frequent, fast, reliable, all-day service to grow ridership and meet customer expectations, continuously improving equity in our region and increasing access to opportunity, jobs, and destinations, and then a real focus on maximizing the efficiency of the use of our assets across the system and across the region. For rail specifically, there are a handful of categories or, as Bob said, buckets of things that Metro can do or the region can do to improve reliability, improve efficiency, and respond to customer needs and grow ridership. We can add peak capacity on the rail system. We can change rail service headways on the different lines across the system. We can change and adapt service patterns using the limited infrastructure that the system allows. And we can consider adjusting hours of operation, particularly on weekends. Some just additional context here, and looking back at our recent ridership trends, as we've discussed, we've seen continuous and sustained rail ridership growth. Rail ridership was about 27% higher in FY24 than it was the previous year. We're projecting continued growth, and we're seeing that daily and weekly here in the month of October. But of course, there's uncertainty on the rate of that growth and when and where we can expect to see it. We are also seeing continued growth in our peak periods. So during the pandemic, the peak period ridership volumes took a much bigger hit than other times of day. But recently, we've seen fairly rapid growth in the AM peak and the PM peak, particularly on Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. So in the month of September this year, the AM peak was about 12.5% higher than the prior year, and the PM peak was just under 12% higher than the prior year. And then in terms of our operation, important thing to note, our 7,000 series rail cars are now and will be in FY26 fully available to support service. So that constraint that we've had from a rail car availability standpoint that fed into our last couple of budget cycles will not be a factor in FY26. There is, however, still a constraint with the total fleet size, and that limits what we can do in terms of increasing service frequency and capacity. During, as I mentioned, during peak hours, particularly in the middle of the week on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, but increasingly on Mondays and Fridays as well, we're seeing trains fuller and approaching the capacity of our current service levels. So the image on the left shows a full train with about 100 people on this car, and about 35 to 45 people standing, roughly. The diagram on the right shows how crowded our trains are relative to the current service capacity that we're operating. Trains are approaching our fullness or our crowding standards on the red line in both directions, but particularly in the stretch between the inbound stretch between Noma and DuPont Circle, and the orange and silver lines from Courthouse through Roslyn to Foggy Bottom. So you see the darker red in those portions of the diagram on the slide. The green and yellow lines are also seeing substantial ridership growth. September 2024 ridership is just about 100% of 2019 ridership north of Mount Vernon Square. But the additional capacity north of Mount Vernon Square and south of L'Enfant Plaza are keeping the crowding more manageable there than as compared to the red line in both directions and the blue, orange, and silver on inbound from Courthouse. Metro's system design, the locations of where we have junctions and pocket tracks really limit the potential combinations of service patterns that the system can operate. This diagram on the right shows the number of peak of trains per hour leaving each terminal in peak service, and how that capacity combines while after the trains pass the junctions in the central parts of the system. Metro was designed this way to use interline service to add capacity at the center of the system where most customers are. Some of the differences in the frequency or the departures from the terminals are due to asymmetry in the system's infrastructure. So for example, you can see that the blue, orange, and silver lines have 3 terminals on the western side of the region and only 2 terminals on the eastern side of the region. So again, part of the design here is asymmetrical. Currently, we're only using in normal service the turnback infrastructure north of Mount Vernon. And of course, Metro's trunk lines, so the places where lines share service share the same lines, see much higher ridership than the system branches. So the places where towards the ends of the lines where there is only one line operating on the line. This chart summarizes average weekday ridership by segment of the system and also shows combined train frequency in each segment. So for example here, the red line between Grosvenor and Silver Spring has the highest ridership of any segment, and trains run every 5 minutes during peak hours. This is notably actually lower frequency than the other two major core trunk lines, which have combined service frequency of every 3 to 4 minutes. So the blue, orange, silver, and the green and yellow. Overall, these major trunk lines have the highest ridership relative to the branch segments, as I mentioned on the right. The original system concept was to use these interline services to provide that additional capacity and frequency to support higher volumes of customers in the core of the system. So as I mentioned, Metro's infrastructure provides limited opportunities to turn back trains in service through the use of pocket tracks. The location of each of those turnbacks is also really important. It allows us to change rail service patterns, but doesn't always align with where customer volumes are or where customers use the system the most. So for example, the New Carrollton branch and the downtown Largo branch of the blue, orange, silver lines have similar total ridership, but the downtown Largo branch has twice as much capacity. So two times more train frequency. And then sort of by comparison here, more customers use rail or ride rail north of our existing Mount Vernon Square turnback on the yellow line than any other potential turnback location in our existing system. On the red line, the turnbacks are closer to the ends of the line. So ridership beyond the turnbacks, as you can see here, is lower than the rest of the core central red line. So we have 4 ways that the team is contemplating and considering here to add peak capacity in order to meet ridership demand. And these are really sort of complementary methods and can be combined as part of an overall strategy or package. Longer trains is really the simplest way to add capacity. So maintaining the same service frequency, but increasing the number or the ratio of 8-car trains to 6-car trains. Increasing train frequency also adds train capacity as well as shorter customer wait times. So changing the schedule could allow Metro to ensure that trains continue to be evenly spaced and improve reliability while adding frequency and capacity to the service. We also have a thing called tripper trains, which are trains that are deployed between regularly scheduled trains to add capacity to the line at key points. This is a less efficient way of doing it than building capacity into the schedule. And then, of course, turnbacks can also be used to concentrate frequency and capacity in places where customer volumes are higher. We also, as the board has been discussing in other meetings, have an opportunity here with the return to automatic train operations, maximum speeds, and with the already implemented automatic door operations. These systems are, of course, safer, faster, more reliable, but they also have a significant efficiency benefit for Metro. So by speeding up the trains on each of the lines, we can operate the same service headway with fewer trains potentially, requiring fewer operators over the course of the day and fewer rail cars in service. So we expect both that faster, more reliable service will drive ridership and revenue growth, but also lead to efficiency and cost savings. And the opportunity here, of course, is to take those cost savings and reinvest that in service improvements where we are seeing the highest volume of customer trips. Another area, as I highlighted before, of a potential service change is for our rail hours of operation. So by adding in particular here, an extra hour of service on Saturday and Sunday mornings, opening the rail system at 6 a.m. rather than 7 a.m. Important note here, obviously opening the system earlier benefits people who want to travel during that time period, but it also benefits existing customers who ride in the 7 a.m. to 8 to 9 a.m. period as train service generally ramps up in the morning. Opening an hour earlier can obviously increase access to destinations for our customers, access to airports to catch morning flights, for the workforce at airports and other destinations that open earlier than the Metro Rail service operates today. And we're fairly confident here that there is a real opportunity for ridership growth because when we look at overall regional travel demand on all modes, cars and transit, the weekend morning time window of 6 to 7 a.m. is the busiest travel period in the region when Metro Rail is not currently open. It also features higher travel demand than late night on Friday into Saturday and Saturday into Sunday. There are about 50% more trips in the region in the 6 a.m. weekend hour than there are in the late night 1 to 2 a.m. hour. And then just briefly on the bus side, so we're continuing to work towards proposing the final Year 1 Better Bus Network redesign to the board for adoption next month. And as we discussed a number of times, that plan for Year 1 is a resource neutral plan, resource neutral with our current levels of service. But we know there are many areas of our region where ridership is growing and in fact some places where we are leaving customers at the bus stop because the bus is too full. There are opportunities here to increase service frequency, increase the span of service in some locations, focus on building out more of our frequent service network across the whole region. Opportunities again for expansion of late night and overnight service, connections to airports and that sort of thing. Just to wrap up here, I think the team's been working on a number of these considerations and trade-offs, and we anticipate including some of these concepts and optimization activities in the proposed budget later this year. Bob, back to you.
So just to wrap this up, as we mentioned, the FY 2027 operating forecast will provide high-level projections of key metrics. Those include ridership, revenue, expenses, and net subsidy. The 27 operating forecast is built off of the FY 2026, and on the right of the slide, it identifies some of the assumptions: 2% ridership growth, 1.8% revenue growth, 2.8% growth in expenses, and 3% growth in net subsidy. The next slide is, and finally, to close with the budget milestone timeline, I know you're aware of the dates. Again, it's proposed budget in December to the board, late January public hearings, and then late March for board review and hopefully budget approval of the final budget. Thank you for your time. Tom and I are happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. That was a really good detailed presentation. Certainly I think most of us who are out on the system have seen those capacity gains, ridership gains. I recently was on an Orange Line train in Virginia that was leaving customers on the platform because the train was so crowded, and we were running good service with good frequency. It just was simply crowded. So that, especially that Tuesday through Thursday period, we're definitely seeing that. For my part, if you're looking for just high level feedback, I would encourage you to bring us your proposal for the most efficiently run service. Turnbacks have been a politically fraught discussion on this board and in this agency for a long time. I think anybody who wants to opine on that topic should sit down and look at that presentation that you just gave about these details of capacity and where the pocket tracks are. But as the agency responsible for moving the most people, ultimately it is our authority and our ability, and should be our mission, to do so as efficiently as possible. And so it is time for our regional partners sometimes to put away some of those old, outdated, parochial point of view on that topic and work with us to provide the service that we need to provide in places that we need to provide it. And I think the data tells the story. So looking forward to obviously many more conversations to come on this, but I think that was a really great overview, understanding of those topics. Other questions, comments? Start with committee members first again. All right, Dr. Lowe.
Agreed that the turnback discourse will never be the same after it's been devastated and revolutionized by this PowerPoint presentation. I think that all of this, honestly, ultimately is simply leading up to how important it is that we revisit the operating budget allocation formula. Because this is great information that can support better data-driven decisions, but it has to be aligned with how we manage costs in order to create the incentive to do what we know we should do. We have to make it easier to do the right thing. We can't just thump the table and be like, we have to think more regionally. Though I'm for it. I'm for thinking regionally. So, I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Okay. Well, with no further business to come before the committee, we will take a 5-minute break and then have our board meeting.
Good morning. We're going to reconvene. I'm Valerie Santos, the chair of the WMATA board. Thank you for being here today. And we're running slightly behind, so I don't know if it's apologies, but acknowledging, and we're going to try and move through our agenda efficiently. So first, we'll begin with the approval of the agenda. I'd like to consider the agenda approved as presented. Any objections from my colleagues online or in person? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. Thank you. We have 4 sets of minutes for approval from the September 26th board meeting, from the October 10 special board meeting, and then from the executive sessions on the 26th of September and October 10th. I'd like to consider these minutes approved as presented. Any objections? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. Thank you. So the next portion of our agenda, we're going to do a employee spotlight. So the first board spotlight recognizes Kimmy Feldbauer, Chief of Staff, who's also the Strategic Transformation Officer, who has been featured in Mass Transit's 40 Under 40. Please stand. An example of talent and dedication Metro seeks to employ. Ms. Feldbauer has been making waves since being hired as the Strategic Transformation Project Manager. That's a very long title. In August of 2022, if I'm not mistaken, you joined us from Texas, right? You moved here to become part of the leadership team. Upon joining Metro, she and her team quickly got to work formulating Metro's strategic transformation plan, which has been referenced in many board meetings, Your Metro, the Way Forward. The plan was adopted by the board in February 2023, and she has since risen the ranks at Metro, assuming her current position in May of 2024. Her success is, of course, the product of many years of hard work in the transportation sector in the last 14 years, leading transformational projects in other cities in the United States and holding various advocacy roles since 2012. She graduated from the American Public Transportation Association, APTA, Emerging Leaders Program in 2022, and she's on the Women's Transportation Seminar. These are long titles. DC Chapter Board of Directors. In addition, Feldbauer is on the Young Professionals in Transportation Board of Advisors for the 2023 to 2025 term, and her inclusion in Mass Transit's 40 Under 40 will come as no surprise to those familiar with her work at Metro. Her record of success and dedication to public transportation have contributed to keeping Metro moving forward. Okay, we're going to make a second board spotlight. You can sit for a second. The second board spotlight recognizes Anthony Harris. Please stand. Oh, we have a visitor. Anthony, not our visitor, is the Senior Manager of Performance and Global Benchmarking Office for featuring also in Mass Transit's 40 Under 40. Since 2019, Mr. Harris has been hard at work finding different ways to improve Metro. Last year, his team identified and shared industry best practices from 47 peer agencies across 5 continents to help Metro enhance services. Those best practices were in areas like track incident management, solar panel installation, and paratransit fare collection processes. I personally am looking forward to getting briefed on these topics because I've asked about it, to learn how they've been incorporated here at Metro. Mr. Harris has received awards for facilitating performance management practices here internally at Metro and has also earned the Sustainability Award for Young Professionals for his leadership in program management on Metro's supply chain transformation. With his team, Mr. Harris has been optimizing the way services are delivered at Metro. With his focus on continued sustainable improvement, Metro can ensure that its growth is accompanied by reliable service. And yes, we're going to clap and then ask you guys to come up front. You have the things, right?
Okay.
Okay, yes. Okay, now we're moving to the public comment and reports from our advisory bodies. I think we did not receive online comments, so we're now going to call some in-person speakers. And in order, let's see. So Sam Allison Jensen.
Good morning. My name is Sam Allison Jensen. I go by Sam for short. So regarding the presentation about the possibility of Metro opening 1 hour earlier on weekends is great, but like for possibly taking an earlier flight or running errands earlier, I might need it, you might need it, someone in this room might need it. However, I think Metro could benefit from staying open later over opening earlier. I mean, if you think about it, like bars, clubs, restaurants, nightlife, or simply a night out on the town. I mean, it's not really my scene, but it is every once in a blue moon. But the foggy bottom line is, if people are willing to spend their money on those things, I'm sure they'd be willing to on Metro Rail if it ran later to travel home over Lyft or Uber or rideshare. And I understand that there are some things that tie into why we wouldn't be able to expand hours, such as like after hours maintenance and spending out more money towards running more trains. But that's just my $2.50 on that matter. So the last part is particularly aimed at you, Randy. I really appreciate the community engagement that you brought to Metro. Not to step on anyone's toes, but I feel like we didn't really have that with the previous leadership and administration. And I know that you have a team behind you that helps brainstorm and showcase these ideas and events, but they're a lot of fun. I've gone to Metro Fest, I've gone to Metro Brew, and I've even gone to the 2000 Sirius Send-Off last Saturday, and it's a lot of fun. It brings my transit friends and I together and things like that, and we're not really, we don't really get together like we used to. I mean, everybody's grown, they have their own lives, different job schedules, whatever have you. And I have fun, bonding and meeting new people, and even the employees that show up up there. So I really appreciate these community engagements, and not just the fun events, but even other things like the Better Bus Network, being able to voice my opinion on things like that. So I really appreciate that. But thanks for everything that you do for my metro and providing me a safe space to share my comments today. Onward, as you say.
Thanks, Sam. The next speaker I see here is Sandy Newsel, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Okay. Next person on the list is Jasmine Gailey.
All right. Good morning. My name is Jasmine Gailey, and I'm here because I started a petition with over 500 signatures urging Metro to continue their after-hours commuter service program. The reason I'm so passionate about this is because I was robbed and assaulted 3 years ago at gunpoint by 4 men after midnight while walking home from my bartending job. I wish my story was unique, but it's not. We see this with many service industry workers constantly being victimized late night. So when this program began in 2019, it was essential for a lot of late night workers. And it was frustrating hearing that it was going away just a few weeks ago. It felt like there was a good amount of time for late night workers to be able to provide other options. So I urge the board to consider keeping this program, but I also challenge the board to take your commute between the hours of midnight and 4 a.m. using the 14 new buses that Metro is providing, and then ask yourself, is this a safe and reliable option for transportation? And is that enough to get rid of this program? Because late night workers are saying no. So I would like to engage with you all more in this conversation, and I hope that you would be willing to at least communicate with late night workers when making decisions that directly affect us. Thank you so much.
Thanks for sharing your perspective. The next person on the list is Dylan Pitcher.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for taking the time. My name is Dylan. I am also here to speak about the after-hours service commuter program. I personally work in hospitality and have been here in Washington, D.C. for the past 10 years, and it's very critical that we're able to make sure that our employees are able to get home safely. I think pretty much to echo, every single place I've ever worked in this city, there has been a story about somebody being harmed or assaulted on their way home. And the ability of our employees to get home at later hours allows us to stay open later, allows for greater economic activity, which is ultimately better for Washington, D.C. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your comments. Next on the agenda is our Accessibility Advisory Committee Chair, Patrick Sheehan. I think he's online. Pat?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'd like to say a couple of things here this morning. First, I understand that you'll be considering 2 applicants to the Accessibility Advisory Committee, and appreciate their consideration before the board. That would make our Virginia contingent pretty much whole, which is going to be important moving forward. Particularly, I think we have 2 very capable women, so that would be all women coming from Virginia, which I think bodes well. Second thing I would like to talk about is the WayMap project, which is a project for wayfinding that's been on the agenda and been with WMATA for about 3 or 4 years now. That project completed on the 15th of October, with the final studies being done around that time. The blind community who is participating in this access through the rail stations really appreciates this work. It was done through the American Council of the Blind and also WMATA, who sponsored the program. My impression and the impression of other blind people that we talked to said that this system is extremely good within WMATA. It also improves safetiness by indicating through your iPhone when the doors are open at the rail system. I was very pleased with the efficiency of the system, with its capability The training communication plan, I know they're working on and they're waiting for WMATA approval. From the blindness community, and I think from the members of the AAC that have looked at this system, I would say that this system should be green lighted, and I think it'll improve wayfinding throughout the WMATA system. I think the last area that I want to speak about, which I think is most important, and maybe Mr. Drummond can help me with this area, is Prince George's County. We have been looking at a plan called the Transit Vision Plan for Prince George's County. We brought that up, I think, back in September. And I'm very disappointed in our response from Prince George's County so far in trying to figure out, first of all, when the Transit Vision Plan was released. We looked at this plan, which gives a 5-year overview of improvements in Prince George's County. We couldn't even find out when that when the plan was initiated. We think it was initiated in 2018, but we don't know. Terry Bellamy, whose name is on the plan, we looked at the plan and tried to get in touch with him, retired 3 years ago. And what we see at least within Prince George's County that I'm aware, is a very second-rate bus service, which does not give us service on the weekends. It is supplemented by something called Call a Ride, which for disabled people, you need to put in a 2-week notice with respect to reserving a ride to a particular destination. You've got another portion of the system, Connect a Ride, I think it's called, that works between 10 in the morning and 3 in the afternoon and only serves a small pocket of individuals. This is not the way a system should be run within the WMATA system. We don't see Montgomery County doing this. We don't see Fairfax doing this, or Arlington. And we just think that this could be done so much more. We have been in touch with Prince George's County to try to get someone to attend our bus and rail committee meeting. We have not received an answer back to our invitation. We'd like someone to be there on the 12th to go through this transit vision plan to explain how much of that plan has been implemented over the last 5 years. But we just think that it would be an interesting plan for the board to take a look at, to ask some questions with respect to where is Prince George's County as far as implementing the recommendations going forward in this plan. I brought it up at the DMV Moves discussion yesterday. The reaction from the room was that they're aware of the challenges within Prince George's County. My questions were not the first that they've heard, and probably won't be the last they've heard. But what I think we need to do is to raise the priority of what is being done in Prince George's County, find out what is being done and start to measure it, and move forward with a plan that's going to make Prince George's County part of the regional system that we need to have moving forward. I'd love to answer some questions, but I would recommend that if the board wanted to take a look at the transit vision plan, I'm sure we can get the copy to them.
Thanks, Pat, for your comments. Yes, it's giving me things to follow up about, or us as a board to follow up about. I would now like to call Mr. Colstout for the RAC report.
Thank you, Chair Santos, and good morning to the board. We had our regular meeting of the RAC a couple weeks ago, and we really focused on public safety and rail car cleanliness, which are issues that came up in our annual report. We had a really good discussion with the chief and deputy chief about perceived increase in crime amongst customers, while we have demonstrated decrease in crime across all categories. So really diving deep into that and how Transit Police has supplemented with the special police and the walkthroughs on rail cars and stations, and really positive feedback from our members there, and thinking about rail car cleanliness and how that team works and how customers can engage with Metro staff in real time to get cars cleaned at turnbacks or at terminal stations. And also, we're really looking for, we talked a bit about the circulator going out of service and the supplemental service that WMATA will be providing, and really kind of previewed our discussion next month. I think we're looking forward to having the Better Bus team back and diving into all things bus for 2 hours. So it'll be a riveting and fun conversation. And of course, y'all are welcome to drop in and listen in anytime.
Thanks, Cole. And I appreciate the role that we appreciate the role that the RAC plays in terms of giving us feedback, and just also your comment a moment ago about perception versus reality and helping Metro get the word out on exactly this thing, because I think perception lags the reality. And anybody have any questions for Mr. Stout? Okay, that concludes our advisory reports. Now on to the chair's report. So just taking care of some administrative business. As Pat mentioned a moment ago, we need to make some appointments to the Accessibility Advisory Committee, or the AAC. So again, to refresh the memory, the AAC provides recommendations on accessibility-related items to the board. And the mission of the AAC is to actively seek input from a broad range of older adults as well as persons with disabilities, and from organizations about operational issues that affect the accessibility of rail, Metrobus, and Metro Access services. As Pat mentioned or alluded to, the AAC has three vacancies amongst its 20 members. And as well, there are 3 members who are currently serving beyond the expiration of their terms. So today we're going to fill 5 of those 6 slots. Therefore, I move the following for approval, which is the reappointment of Steve Caffin and Thomas Mangrum from the District of Columbia, Tino Calabia from Maryland, all with terms to expire June 30th of 2028. Also, the appointment of Susan Bowmaster from the Commonwealth of Virginia, whose term of service will expire on June 30th of 2025. And the appointment of Susan Ratt from the Commonwealth of Virginia, whose term of service will expire on June 30th of 2026. Can I please have a second? I hear, great. Second by Board Member Letourneau. Any discussion or comments? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Come on, bye. Thank you. I was gonna say robust eyes. All right, I'm teasing.
Online too.
And online too. There we go. All right. So any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. We just need to make sure, just checking we're all still awake. Next, I would like to highlight the joint board tour we held last week with the Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority, or MWA, at the Metro Integrated Command and Communication Center. The command center, as most of you presumably know, opened roughly a year ago. It just celebrated its anniversary. And it allows Metro to deliver better customer service to riders and also improve our safety in the DMV by integrating all of Metro's operations, bus safety maintenance, rail communications, video, and other critical functions into one entity. Needless to say, our regional partnerships are critical to Metro. So just wanted to publicly say something to thank our MWA partners, specifically Chair Thorne Posen and the other board members who attended the tour, Metro board members and MWA board members who attended the tour last week. We, Metro, have great synergy and shared interests with the Airports Authority, as 2 of our Metro stations serve both employees and passengers every day. The Dulles station is a great example of this. Opening in November of 2022, the Silver Line Extension's most popular station is Dulles, accounting for about 1/3 of the total ridership at the 6 stations. I'm told that on average, 4,600 people pass through the Dulles station on weekdays and more than 4,500 on the weekends. DCA is about 11,400 on weekdays and 9,400 on the weekends. This past June, the station surpassed over 2 million passengers. Dulles. I'm glad that we had the occasion to host MWA at the command center, and we look forward to collaborating on various shared issues of concern and opportunities, such as signage. Finally, October is known for being Breast Cancer Awareness Month. It is a global effort to raise awareness about breast cancer, including the importance of early detection. In 2024, more than 360,000 people globally or in the United States? United States will be diagnosed with breast cancer, but advancements in early detection methods and support continue to increase the chances of survival. When caught at its earliest localized stages, the 5-year relative survival rate is 99%, which is quite different than 50 years ago. I will also note of personal interest, which is that October is Philippine American History Month. It's celebrated typically in October, and as someone who happens to be at Philippine American Heritage, I just wanted to take the chance to mention it. The month celebrates the history, pursuits, accomplishments, and legacy of many Filipinos in the United States, and it's the second largest Asian population in the United States. And the celebration of this month commemorates the first recorded presence of Filipinos in the United States, which was in 1587. This concludes my report, and I will now turn it over to the general manager.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was going to say that was a little known fact, as Cliff Clavin used to say, I think, right? So good Jeopardy information there. But thank you for that. I know you said timing, so I'll go through mine relatively quickly. I have mostly, last month you may recall, I laid out more little strategy where we are for the year. I'll take a couple things on that, but really want to highlight some really important statistics of kind of what's going on at Metro. And I will say I got a little breaking news here, which I think is really a fun, positive thing we can do. So on the ridership front, we continue to go in the right direction. 43 straight months of ridership growth. 2 years ago, if you look at September, we were up 62% on rail, 24% of bus, 40% combined. And then so far in October, we're actually continuing to increase again, which is a great sign compared to even what September was. So we're seeing this at all days of the week. We're seeing it, as Tom mentioned, in peaks. We're seeing it at special events, which I'll talk about. Federal employees back on the system at higher levels. Monday and Friday used to be pretty significant laggards. Now we have basically almost 400,000 on rail on Monday now. So we are really seeing it across the board. Board member Letourneau mentioned there was crowding on the train, can't get on. We're hearing more and more complaints about crowding. Not what we ultimately want, but a great sign that this system's coming, has roared in a lot of ways back to life. So I want to highlight that. The next slide is really want to highlight the combined. We're hitting 900,000 a day now pretty consistently, and we expect today to probably hit that number as well. Yesterday was our new record high, since the pandemic, of approximately 935,000. So, our big goal was at one point to get back to even thinking of 8, and then to think of 9, and now, the team is very focused on how do we deliver service to induce up to 1 million. So one day, I think it's clear that's not going to happen this fall, but, knock on wood, maybe by the spring, we could get back to that. So I think, we should take a moment and just realize where we were 2 years ago compared to where we are now on this system coming back to life. And it's really great to see. And I just thank kind of the team for how hard they've worked. So that was part of the breaking news. The big thing is this next slide. And I can't overstate how proud I am of this organization, from the board's leadership to everyone delivering every day. Last quarter, we had our highest customer satisfaction ever on rail at 90%, and we beat that again this quarter at 92%. 83% on bus is actually now the highest ever in the history of bus. The previous high was 82 years ago. So we have the public saying overwhelmingly that they are happy with the services that this organization is delivering. So really just want to take a moment and thank the staff in the room, all of our colleagues out in the field, shops, overnight, you name it. you are delivering fantastic service, and the community is responding both with their legs and wheels rolling and walking onto our system, at the same time with their voices responding that we are delivering service. So, I think this is a moment that we should. I've never seen 92% of people in America agree on anything. So the fact that we're going to take this and kind of celebrate, I don't know how we hold this. I'll be perfectly honest, but we're going to do everything we can. As we talk about special events a lot, and Chair, I appreciate your comments about the airports. A couple things to highlight, because the world is maybe a little different than everyone just doing the offices, although that's kind of roared back. We are the special event connector of this region. So take the Nats season this year, we went up 47% estimated of people taking Metro to Nats games. That is one of the bigger economic driving things in our region. Howard's homecoming last weekend was the largest day ever in the history of Shaw Howard Station, which is a big deal. Caps games, the opener and all the other games were averaging about 4,600 people a game. Again, big deal in the downtown area, driving economic activity. For the Army 10 miler, we had 16,000 trips. So it was our busiest since 2019. Had a big U.S. Army conference at Mount Vernon with 46,000 trips last weekend. I know some of the board really interested in. We've now crossed 10,000 enrollees in our Metro Lift subsidized program, which is a big deal. And obviously, we have Marine Corps Marathon this weekend, which we're very excited. We opened 2 hours early to support this incredible community event, which we know we're going to have incredible ridership and a busy day. So good luck to all the runners out there. On the strategy front, two things that we're working on, again, kind of we keep those major themes going, is automatic train operation. Obviously, we've talked to that in a lot of detail. Just want to highlight, really thank between Teresa, Brian, and Andy and their entire team's leadership on this. We're getting close to the finish line here in our minds. We actually completed a training pilot with the WMSC and local ATU 689 in attendance last week. So now we've launched the 2-day training for qualifications for operators. So we now actually have operators that are fully qualified for ATO, and we continue to do training. Our final simulated service is scheduled in November, and we are, in our minds, fully ready to launch in December. So we look forward to wrapping up the paperwork element of that, and then getting that over to WMSC for what we would assume is anticipated concurrence. So working very hard. This is 15 years in the making of getting this organization back. It will definitely improve safety. It will definitely improve reliability. As Tom mentioned, it brings cost savings and efficiencies as well. The next piece I want to highlight in talented teams is one of the things that, from a public safety point of view, but also engaging in our employees, investing in our employees, and also cost efficiency, is we used to do our training academy at the Northern Virginia Training Academy. They were not able to put enough classes together for us to get as many officers through on an annualized basis. So a thing here for a long time is having our own academy. We finally got that all stood up, and we got fully certified. It is very complex to get certified, but we got that certified. We actually have a group of about 24, 26 recruits there now. I visited with them about 2 weeks ago. They just started. But it's because all of the normal kind of, if you will, law enforcement training. But we're able to reduce the training because of the 3-state requirement and do it a better and more efficient way. We estimate an annual savings of $1 million a year by having our own academy, and we're going to be able to get officers retained and get them out on the system much sooner, which helps with the overall public safety. So really congratulate the chief and a few others that were really involved with this to make this happen. So again, cost efficiency, better investment in public safety at the same time. Lastly, to the board, I just wanted to highlight there's some big national stuff coming up, and just making sure that publicly we really acknowledge that we understand these days of national significance and we are prepared. So November 5th is obviously Election Day. Our country is obviously, arguably fairly divided in a lot of things, not our role here at Metro, but we obviously want to provide great service, but also understand that, there could be protests, there could be rallies, there could be a variety of things, but we are going to be prepared the night of Election Day. Quite frankly, the McPherson Station area will be probably where the most attention usually has around election night. But we will have extra officers out, we will have extra operations personnel, and we're very coordinated with all of our regional partners. On January 6th, we're going to proactively, have our Emergency Operations Center activated. We have no intelligence or anything to suggest otherwise, but we want to lean in on readiness. We're going to have extra staff out. All of our law enforcement coordination is going on between whether it's MPD, Capitol Police, Secret Service, that type of nature. And again, on inauguration for us, our every 4-year Super Bowl, it actually ends up being more than the day itself. We bring in law enforcement officers from around the country, from transit systems all over the country to support. I think it's about 150, 160 officers from different transit agencies come in here to support. They get deputized, and then they work under the leadership of transit police to support all of the crowds. Knock on wood, this is nothing more than crowd management, but we will be fully prepared and fully coordinated with all of our law enforcement partners. So I just wanted to get that out very publicly. This organization is part of the national security framework here in our nation's capital, and we are very coordinated and really appreciate the partnership with all of our regional partners. So with that, Madam Chair, that is my update. I'm happy, obviously, to take any questions or direction from the board.
Thank you. Now we'll do some updates from the jurisdictions. So we'll just do a round. Mr. Drummer, are you prepared?
Nothing to report, Madam Chair.
Okay. I warned everybody. Mr. Smedberg?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to update folks briefly. We had our third meeting of the SJ28 Joint Subcommittee in Virginia. It's looking at the long-term transit needs in Northern Virginia. We had an update on land use and transit trends in the area. We had cost comparisons of various systems in Northern Virginia and throughout the Commonwealth. We discussed an overview of 10 revenue sources for potential funding. We had the technical group update where we discussed maybe additional areas that we would want to consider. And it was, a very good meeting. We have a lot of key legislators who make up this committee, which is great. The Secretary of Transportation for the Commonwealth, Shep Miller, also serves on this board, and I am a member. So that's all I have to report. I'm not sure if my colleague, Mr. Letourneau, has anything.
Yeah, I'll just mention Mr. Smedberg, myself, and the general manager traveled to the Governor's Transportation Conference earlier this week in Norfolk to give our annual required report to the Commonwealth Transportation Board as part of the dedicated funding that was provided in 2018. We gave a comprehensive report. Some of the slides that we all saw earlier in the Finance Committee were part of that. We received, I think, very positive feedback from the CTB members and some good questions. That CTB is chaired by Secretary Miller, who also made some encouraging comments about Metro's performance and the general manager's performance. So all in all, good discussion, good meeting. We're going to continue to engage, in particular with the Northern Virginia board members. There's one new CTB appointee that I recently met with, and then one that's on for about another 10 months that have taken a particular interest. And so we're working and hope to hopefully host them actually soon at one of our facilities. So just wanted to add that as well.
Super helpful. Thank you so much. It occurs to me, Mr. Drummer, we may want to highlight, and maybe I'll ask the general manager to do it, a nice event that happened earlier this week.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I apologize if I didn't mention that. So we had a really nice event earlier this week at Grocer Strathmore Station, an event where our team partnered with basically an old surface parking lot, collaborated with Montgomery County, who has this really incredible abatement program, really incentivizing transit-oriented development and density near our stations. And the developer in this case happened to be 5 Squares, but the Strathmore, conservatory leader is a part of it as well. So it's a several hundred unit development right next to our station. That's phase 1 that they delivered. Went up with members of the Montgomery County Council. Really appreciate the partnership there. I think their next phase is actually a senior housing specifically right next to that on a different lot, so all surrounded by our station. So again, this is that kind of stuff that Metro Strategic Real Estate Program is leaning into. Want to thank Tunde, Liz, for all their hard work, and we have a lot of solicitations out there and a lot of other opportunities, and I think we want to continue to be the facilitator of community development. We're not a real estate developer. We tell people online all the time, we're not penciling projects out. We need these projects to work, but we want to make them happen and get as many people living a transit-oriented lifestyle and community as possible.
Thank you. And I just wanted to highlight that as well because it's a good example of partnerships, not just with the county, but also, if I'm not mistaken, it's Amazon's Housing Equity Fund. So again, partnership between the business community, local government, as well as ourselves. Board member?
Thanks. A couple DC updates. I mean, it sounds like the Virginia folks have been hard at work on transportation stuff, but I think it's important that everyone in the district remember that early voting begins on Monday, October 28th. Don't forget to vote, and don't forget to turn your ballot over for the local referendum that we have on the back here in DC. Also, it's not too soon for everyone to tune into the fact that DC's downtown holiday market will kick off on November 22nd. Yes, the holidays are here, and you can celebrate them in downtown DC.
Thank you, board member. Ms. Klein?
Thank you, Madam Chair. On behalf of the federal government, I wanted to observe that October is also National Disability Employment Awareness Month. The goal of this month is to promote workplace inclusion and celebrate the contributions of people with disabilities, as well as educate about disability employment issues, and increase the inclusion of people with all types of disabilities in the workforce. The theme for the 2024 National Disability Employment Awareness Month is Access to Good Jobs for All, highlighting the need to expand inclusive, high-quality job opportunities for individuals with disabilities. This is something that's a priority at the federal level, and I know is important to WMATA as well, both through the services we provide to get people to work on bus, rail, and metro access, but also efforts to make metro itself an inclusive and accessible workplace. So wanted to acknowledge that.
Thank you. With no further business to come before the board, we now stand adjourned. Thank you for joining us today. We will now move to board executive session. So in accordance with the bylaws, I, Valerie Santos, request that the Board of Directors convene an executive session to discuss the following matters pursuant to Article 2, Paragraph 9, subsections A, which is budgetary matters that may affect legal positions, WMATA contracts, or sensitive relationships with local jurisdictions and the federal government. B, litigation, investigations, and other legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice or consultation with counsel and staff members. C, personnel and labor issues, including discussions of labor contracts and labor negotiations, consideration or interviews of candidates for employment, and the assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, or resignation of individuals. And lastly, G, disposition of WMATA property or acquisition of real property for WMATA purposes, where discussion in public would adversely affect WMATA's negotiating or bargaining position. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Board Member Letourneau. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I heard 2 ayes. Any opposed? I heard no opposed. I'm going to assume the ayes have it. Thank you, everybody.